Welcome to the Startup Help Desk. This is your source for answers to questions about building companies, starting companies, and the meaning of life. Your panelists here are all experienced founders, entrepreneurs, and investors. We've worked with thousands of companies over the years, helping learn all the hard lessons that we're going to share with you to save you that same pain. I'm Sean Burns. I've been a founder for about 20 years of companies like Flurry and Outlier. I've coached hundreds of companies, invested in many more. These days, I shared all my hard-learned lessons with you through this podcast and my newsletter, The Breaking Point. I'm joined by two illustrious founders, Ash and Nick.
Hi, everybody. My name's Ash Rust. I'm a pre-seed investor based in San Francisco. I usually invest in B2B companies based in the US, UK, and Canada through my fund, Sterling Road. I've also worked at places like Trinity Ventures as an entrepreneur in residence and Bullpen Capital as an advisor. Before investing, I was an entrepreneur myself, most notably an early employee at the social media analysis company Clout, as well as the CEO and co-founder of SendHub. These days, I spend most of my time coaching founders and have helped more than 1,500 startups over the years.
Hey, this is Nick Melionis. I am co-founder and CEO of a startup called Navi. We help people learn innovation skills, solve mission-critical problems, and start companies. This is round 2 of my time in the land of startups. I've supported hundreds of startups and founders along the way. The startup journey is not easy. It is certainly a good time, especially when learning from Sean and Ash. And so I'm excited to be back and ready to answer some questions.
And today's questions are all about competition. And we have a lot of them. We have a lot to get through, and we'll dive into that. But before we do, keep in mind, all these questions were submitted by people just like you. So if you have a question you'd like us to answer in a future episode, please drop us a line on our website, thestartuphelpdesk.com, or on Twitter at thestartuphd. We would love to answer your questions in the future. That's what we're here for. But for now, let's jump into competition. We all have it. Well, hopefully we do. Maybe we don't. We'll get to that later. Let's start out with the very first question, Ash and Nick. How much time should we spend thinking about our competition?
I'll hop in on this one. So short answer is some. And what that means is almost all of your time as a startup founder should be focused on investigating the hair on fire problem that you're solving with your startup. So you want to be learning about your customers and their needs. In order to do that effectively, it is important to investigate competition. And typically, competition can come in 2 types. In one case, you've got another company that's solving the same problem for the same customer type. And so learning about those competitors helps you learn about your customers. And then the other type of competition is a rising tide, something that is unlocking new ways to solve problems. And so the key thing here is it's, of course, important to investigate it because you want to learn, is it now possible to solve your customers' problems in a way that previously wasn't possible? So you have to investigate it. You have to spend some time looking into it. But of course, the key is the balance, making sure it doesn't become a distraction.
Nick, I feel like I have to nail you down on this because I feel like that's the advice. Like, how much time, like, should I go left or right? And somebody answers maybe. Like, when you say some time, give us some ratio of how much of your time you'd spend on competition versus otherwise.
I would say it's going to be low. So I would say less than 10% of your time, 5% of your time should be looking into it. That'd be my answer for some.
So my thoughts on this are that it's kind of the dream, especially that investors, commentators, mentors have, that the founders that you work with will only be focused on customer needs and never, ever think about competition or, be something small like less than 10%. But every founder I've met, good or bad, spends way too much time thinking about competition. So I try and modify that energy or redirect it into the things that might be the most productive. So there are elements of competition that you should focus on, and they are mostly to do with the names that your potential customers are bringing up. So who are the people that your potential customers are also considering to solve the problem that you solve? We need to know why those potential customers are considering those competitors. And if the competitor wins the business, what was the specific reason that made the customer's decision? So it's okay, though, if we want to lose particular battles. Maybe you're a premium service and you don't want to compete on price, but you do at least need to know why. So everyone's going to spend time on competition. Just make sure you're redirecting that energy towards things that are productive for your business.
So Ash, that's actually brings up an interesting question, Ash. How do you help people narrow down the definition of competition, though? Because, with a broad enough brush, you could almost say like anyone in the software industry is a potential competitor, and maybe Microsoft, maybe Amazon. So when you talk about that competitive set, obviously you're right. The ones that are brought up in sales meetings are obvious, but how do you help them narrow down that definition so you don't waste your time on things that are too far out of field?
Well, I want to restrict the set just to those companies or vendors that are brought up in your customer discovery meetings. So because you're narrowing it by that aggressive level, you're not worried about competing with Google, Microsoft, Facebook, etc. You are in general working with the very narrow set of solutions that the customers actually consider to solve the problem, and also they're restricting how many different competitors you can consider and hopefully reducing the time you spend on it.
That makes sense. And I agree with that, by the way. Even if you disagree with the customer, by the way, and you're like, oh no, they're not a competitor. If the customer brings them up, they're at least a competitor in the eyes of the customer. And so you have to consider them. I think that's a good heuristic to use to limit it.
Yeah, you didn't get to decide who your competitors are. Unlucky.
And on that note, Ash, it seems that one of the main pieces of this is learning about your competition through your customers, because of course that can be the closest to the source of truth, so to speak, to give you some real data.
Certainly in terms of their perception, right, which is what matters for the revenue. You're not going to get them as a customer if their perception is positive about someone else versus you, even if you offer great services. And that many founders feel very strongly that their competitors are terrible, and if their customers only knew, that they would almost certainly switch to them. And of course, that perception is not shared by the customers.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Man, we are really in danger of me agreeing with Ash too much. Nick, save us from that. Ask us another question so Ash and I can disagree.
All right, let's do it. So, second question that we received from a founder is the following. How do you handle entirely new kinds of competition, like LLMs and GPT? Ash, do you want to kick things off? And also, do you want to give a quick intro to LLMs and GPT?
Yes, let me just drop you in there. Yes, so for those people that don't know, who've been living under a rock, essentially large language models and ChatGPT are large scale AI systems that have massive databases of knowledge such that you can query them with questions and get pretty in-depth, detailed answers that might feel like you're talking to a human and might be able to do much deeper solutions than what you might get from just a standard search engine. So, for example, ChatGPT from OpenAI is capable of rewriting an email for you and improving on it, as well as also making suggestions on what movie you might want to watch if you give it a list of the movies that you've seen recently, etc. So a lot of people are very concerned about this who are founders because they feel that the generalized nature of these new products that are coming out, Google has one, OpenAI is the one that everyone's talking about right now. People feel that these generalized intelligent products will be able to completely sweep away perhaps their small niche product. And my concern about that is that it's very rarely the case. When we see these leap forwards in technology and everybody immediately rallies around it and they see the value, I think that you will find that actually creates many, many more opportunities. Now, the way you maximize those opportunities is by focusing on your core niche. So the large language models are inherently generalized. So if you are focusing on a core niche of a small number of customers, then you're going to be in a much better place for serving them, satisfying them, and beating out any kind of competition, even if it's coming from a new technology trend. Of course, that involves talking to customers a lot. So make sure you're reaching out to your best customers, you're reaching out to your potential customers, and you're having conversations with them in a customer discovery context. Now that these new products are launching, you may find that actually the products that you're so worried about are not even in their mindset. They may not even be thinking about them yet. And then, of course, integration. So don't be afraid of these new products, these new trends. Integrate with them, provide their services within your existing workflows, and you might find that you can generate an awful lot of customer value there. If you're a mature product, then you might become a platform, right? That's the example of app stores and nowadays app stores exist even for quite small companies. OpenAI has launched plugins quite recently in just the last few days here at the end of March in 2023. That is an example of where you might be able to integrate with them rather than compete or be afraid of them. And then the last one is just look at the markets that are underserved by a new trend. So if you're looking at markets that are underserved by a new trend, then you're going to have the opportunity to help those people because they're not getting the current attention of everybody else. Doesn't mean they don't have a budget, doesn't mean they don't have revenue generating opportunities for you. So lots and lots of options in the face of any technology trend, especially this current AI trend.
And by the way, everyone listening, don't tell Nick and Ash, but I'm actually an AI because Sean was way too lazy to jump on the episode this week. So everything you hear me saying is AI generated. That's how good the
that would explain the weak reasoning.
Let's see. What can I add to Ash? Because I think he covered a lot of good points. I will emphasize it's going to happen to you. If you build a successful business, it takes around a decade. And in a decade, there are going to be these waves of technology platforms that create new kinds of competition. And one of the hardest things, in my opinion, as a leader is to know which ones are real and which ones are mirages. So Facebook famously missed mobile computing and mobile apps, and it hurt them quite significantly. On the flip side, we were told that VR would change everything. And then we were told that Web3 would change everything. And they didn't really, at least not yet. And now AI might change everything, and maybe it won't. But over the 10 years you're building this industry-defining business, it's going to happen a few times. And so you need to, as best you can, do exactly what Ash said and try to decide for yourself, is this real or is it not? And unfortunately, there's going to be no right answer because the future is playing out. And so you're going to have to make your best guess. And like Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg, you might be wrong about mobile. It looks like he might have been wrong about VR too. Maybe he'll be right about the next one. But at some point, you have to catch some of them. It's a little bit like surfing. You don't have to catch every wave. But at some point, if these waves are coming at you, everybody else is catching them. You have to catch them and ride them on through. I do.
So do we need a chat GPT strategy? Does every startup need one of those?
Oh, I could talk about this for hours. I really could. But I will say this. I think one of the interesting lessons about ChatGPT and LLMs right now is there's two kinds of these platform technology competitions. There's things that are real, like real products that you're competing with to close a sale. And then there's smoke, which is hype and potential and things that don't really have form yet. So a lot of those enterprise buyers, they might not know what ChatGPT is. They may not know what LLMs do, but they've heard about them. Other competitors are talking about how they're integrating them, and they're kind of vague in the details. And so it's really important if you're competing with a competitor on a feature basis or a quality basis or a value basis, you just do your thing. If you're competing with smoke, and this is the thing I tell founders all the time, you don't keep smoke out by building walls. You keep smoke out by buying fans. And so if everybody else in your industry is throwing smoke up about how they're doing generative AI, they've integrated LLMs, and they're using ChatGPT, you should say the same thing. I mean, it's as real as whatever they're spewing out there. I mean, why is it that you have to go there and build an entire generative AI feature set if your competition is just spewing words to try to get mind share? So just be really careful to tell the difference between smoke and actual real concrete competition, because
as you're advising, become the smoke.
Yeah, I I think that it's a valid strategy, at least until it shakes out and you know where the value is, right? I mean, Ash, I don't know, would you advise differently?
I fully accept that marketing and product are separate departments. I think that there may even be more mileage in perhaps showing off in the context of the new trend what your product can do. So we're certainly advising a lot of our AI companies to do that. My undergrad was in AI 25 years ago, quite a long time before this was cool. And a lot of our investments from 2017, 2018 are in the AI space. And now those companies are suddenly getting a lot more attention. We're advising them to hold webinars and conferences, etc., and show off what they can do in the context of comparison with this new LLM trend, because it allows them to demonstrate their power whilst also grabbing people's attention.
Oh, that's interesting. And how do you, for a highly complicated product, how do you do that effectively? Because a lot of these AI products are fairly technical. How do you recommend they do that kind of side by side?
Well, usually ChatGPT is going to, or something similar is going to fail right away at that use case. So you're going to just show off something probably quite funny as a perhaps.
This is the
fail.
infomercial style where like, look at this person trying to use this towel to drive themselves off. Obviously, it doesn't work. You should buy this.
Right. Buy the ShamWow. Right. Exactly.
I see.
And it works because the way what happens is that you've got the trend attraction from the current names that are being used or thrown around in this tech trend, and then you've got the recency bias of your own company's name, and ideally the fact that these potential customers are coming because they've got a need that fits what your service provides. So you're going to be able to get them interested on two levels, and then from that, you're going to get the opportunity to do your demo. And the other thing is that a lot of these AI companies obviously have integrated features that are similar or as powerful, perhaps on a narrower basis. And so they can perhaps show off a comparison there of maybe where ChatGPT is maybe doing summarization on a pretty good level in a certain generalized basis. But if you were talking about a specific sector, maybe consumer packaged goods, maybe we have a tool that's better.
I once saw a webinar on this, and I'm not recommending this, but it was brilliant, I thought, in retrospect, which was, it was promoted as the equivalent would be like, hey, come to this webinar, we'll show you how to use ChatGPT to do this task. And everybody showed up because they wanted to learn about this. They were excited about it. And the company was like, cool, we're going to show you how to use ChatGPT. And like, oh, whoops, it doesn't seem to be working. No, it doesn't seem to be able to do this task. Well, let's show you how to do it with our other tool, which happened to be their product.
Oh, that's well done.
It was very much like that infomercial bait and switch. In retrospect, I was like, I'm not sure if that was brilliant or really sketchy. But
I wonder how many people were just angry about that.
I certainly remember it years later, right? So like, it's a fascinating how much you can
memorable or notorious.
That's right. Broke through the noise. There's something. Hey, so one more quick note on this. Part of this is that, so as a strategy for your startup, you're trying to figure out competing against it. And then, of course, if it's something that requires you to pivot. And so part of this is also figuring out the lightweight ways that you can just learn more about LLMs and GPT. And so, of course, there's processes that might impact your day-to-day that you can use to test this out. And so one thing that could be interesting for folks to consider is just testing out these tools and figuring out, is there something that happens in my day-to-day that allows me to learn about these tools before we then make a significant pivot or investment in our time to investigate how this applies to our business.
So Nick, you missed out on that. That was your opportunity to say, but you could do it better with Navi. See, this is what we're just talking about, the infomercial. You have to get that product pitch.
Well, because you know what happened? Because you gave this great example, and I said, ooh, I love it. And then both you and Ash said, ooh, I don't know. That's not a great tactic. And then I was on the fence thinking, do I jump in right now? Is now the time? Maybe we'll do an edit on this episode and work it in there.
Before we devolve into an actual infomercial.
I'm so lost. What are we talking about?
Ash, save us. Get us to a last question. What else is on our queue for today?
All right, let's bring us back on track. So, what do you do if your competition starts to beat you? What do you do if your competition starts to beat you?
Well, first, I sympathize with you if you're in this position. It's definitely happened to me. I find competition is a little bit like a continuous curve as you're ahead of them, and then they find some angle to compete with you, and then you have to adjust. It ends up being this strange pendulum that swings back and forth. So the very first thing you have to understand is, why are they beating you? Because if you can understand why they're beating, you can do something about it. But why is a hard question. So often you have to start with, okay, where exactly are they beating us? Is it certain kinds of customers, certain demographics, certain segments? And how are they beating us in those places? Do they have a different price point? Do they have a different offering, different value proposition? Is it faster to use? Whatever it might be, how is it that they're beating us? Where are they beating us? And that usually tells you why in the end. It kind of sums up to why. So then you know what your disadvantage is. And then you can start to create some solutions. Now, I have bad news for you. Almost universally, there are no short-term solutions to these problems. Oddly enough, even pricing, if a competition comes in at a lower price, you could say, well, I'll obviously just lower my price. But your business model is somewhat attached to your price. And if you start having a price war with the competition, it can lead to disaster for everyone. So often you have to go around setting expectations with your team, with your investors, that you understand this issue, but you can't solve it tomorrow. It's going to take long-term For example, if you have a product feature gap, you're going to have to build your roadmap to bridge that gap and try to get ahead again. But whatever it is that you come up with, you're going to have to focus on it. It's really critical. I can't tell you how many companies start to lose in the market and they add those tasks on their to-do list. But it's not one, it's not two, it's 1 out of 10 things. Like if you're losing in the market, you need to get back to winning. And you need to focus everything. Everything else is a distraction until you start winning. Because if you start losing ends up being this kind of self-fulfilling prophecy where if you start losing, you'll lose more and more and more. And there's companies I worked with that used to be industry leaders and their win-loss ratio started at 100%, winning every deal. Then it was 90, then it was 80, then it was 70, then it was 60. And all of a sudden you're seen as the second runner. And people talk to you because they need a comparison before they buy whoever the leader is. So if you start losing, you focus on getting back to winning because you do not want to be on that downward curve. That is a horrible place to be. That's all I have to say about that. Nick, what do you think, man? You've never lost at anything. So what's your perspective?
It's scary business going from one loss to the next. I'll tell you that. And I think a key thing that comes through from this is there's a common pitfall that startups will find themselves in. They'll see that they're losing in some way. They get into a tailspin and then try to associate themselves with either some rising tide, some trend, or just adding a new feature that their competition includes.
Like blockchain or AI.
That's exactly right. You just sprinkle some blockchain, you sprinkle AI onto it, and then all of a sudden your problem's solved. That is a recipe for disaster. And so the key thing is we need to figure out where your true north is. And this is all about thinking about your differentiation. And so you want to understand, are we still differentiated? Does our differentiation allow us to solve our customers' problems in a meaningful way? And also, is it reasonable that our differentiation allows us to be the best at X, Y, and Z differentiation? So the key thing really is finding your compass and saying, are we still differentiated? If we're not, let's investigate and get back to the early days of doing customer discovery and finding a great differentiation. And if we are differentiated and we still believe that's valuable, we need to really lean into that and put a lot more effort into making sure that differentiation can be this engine of growth for us. So really differentiation would be the key point of investigation here.
I have a question about Ash and Nick. I was thinking back before this episode on all the really successful companies I've been involved with, and all of them have examples of going through a period like this where they were winning, then all of a sudden they lost their mojo and somebody else was winning, and they kind of found this second win, and that second win kind of roared them to even higher success. But I don't know if that's generalizable. Do you guys have examples? Have you seen that as well, or are there companies that just cruise on through and never go through this?
No, it's a rite of passage for everyone to go through bad periods where you are struggling against your competitors. That means that it's a good market, that the market is valuable, that the market is attracting other talented individuals to participate. And the way you get through it is probably by doing pretty much the same things that made your first product great. Talking to customers, iterating, being committed to building something wonderful, versus just trying to ship something that is okay, and that involves a lot of boring iteration, bug fixing, and all the standard basic stuff. But just being willing to do that in the face of competition, in the face of a downturn in revenue or customer satisfaction, it's hard to commit to those principles or recommit to those principles. But that's the only mechanism that I've seen work. I haven't seen any quick hacks actually having a positive impact.
It's clear that I like the way you put that, Ash, in terms of just talking to more customers, because talking to customers is hard. And so on day one, it's essential. So you go heavy into it. At some point, things start working. It's easy to lose focus and then want to put effort into things that perhaps are more fun or different. And so instead, often you need this reckoning moment to remind you that get back to talking to customers, make that be the integral part. That's the part of your DNA that you can't lose. And then ultimately that can help you right the ship and be able to keep growing.
Fair enough. Well, we will have competition in the future in the form of AI-generated podcasts, but have no fear, the Startup Help Desk will always be handcrafted by artisan founders. We just have to go find some and convince them to do the podcast for us so they can do it. But that'll happen in the future. In the meantime, Ash and Nick, it was great as always. Thank you for your answers to all the questions.
Yeah, so much fun. Thank you both.
Great to hang out, guys.
And if you have questions, we would love to answer them. Please find us on our website, thestartuphelpdesk.com, or on Twitter at thestartuphd. We can't have episodes if we don't have questions, so please submit questions. Don't do it for you, do it for us.
We actually answer your questions. Please submit them. We're not just saying right. that. We don't just do it because
it's not just AI.
We're not running a non-profit here. This is for reals.
That's right. Our producers have a minimum quota of questions, so just do it so we don't lose our jobs here as podcast hosts. We will be back, but for now, the Startup Help Desk is closed. Good luck in building your business.